guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Jaden and I'm going to be telling you about the 10 books I read in February. The first one I read was The Witch's Heart and I rated this one 4.5 stars. So after being put on fire 3 times and surviving and getting her heart back, Agarboda, who's a witch, starts a new life with the god Loki. But when the other gods start to come after her and her family, Agarboda will do whatever it takes to save them. So this was way better than I expected. I liked how it retold Norse mythology, different than what I had learned and read before. I enjoyed Agarboda and Loki's relationship with her, and Shady, who is one of Agarboda's friends. I wish we had got more of Ragnarok rather than just the lead up of the final vision to it, and chapters of it would have been better rather than just parts and chapters. I liked all the character arcs, especially for Agarboda and Loki's children, especially Hel. Hel was one of my favorite characters along with Agarboda and Loki, and I really enjoyed this book. After that, I read I Might Be in Trouble, and I rated this one 4 stars. David's life is not doing great, and it gets worse when after waking up from a one-night stand, he finds him dead. So with the help of his writing agent, David has to figure out what to do next with the body and what's next with his writing career. So I finished this book in little more than a day. The synopsis of the book made it seem like the body moving and all the trouble with it would happen throughout the book. No, that ends in halfway through the book, and then the rest of the book is the fallout and the anxiety of people finding the body and trying to figure out what happened to this guy in the first place and how it might lead to David and his agent overall. I felt like it did drag on a little bit, and the conclusion with Warner, who if I remember correctly was the dead guy's husband, felt a little rushed to me, but overall it was a solid read. The third book I read was My Lovely Wife, and I rated this one 4 stars. A husband and wife commit murders, but trouble ensues when they try to blame the murders on someone else. So it's a very fast-paced read that I sank my teeth into. I liked all the characters and where the plot was taking them, especially with our lead and his wife Millicent. The frame job in the last 30 seconds kind of ruined it for me, so I couldn't give it a higher rating. In a way, it made sense, but it still came out of nowhere for me, and I just didn't like how it tried to work. It seemed off to me, but overall this book was very fun and enjoyable. The fourth book I read was Lenny Marks Gets Away with Murder, and I rated this one 4 stars. So Lenny Marks has a routine and she follows it to a T. But when she gets a letter from the parole board about her stepfather, her life starts to get a little more messy. So it's a very fun read, and the title does come and play in the 3rd act. I liked Lenny's relationship with Ned and how her past was breadcrumbed throughout. Though it did confuse me a little bit with all the names that were thrown out. The book did confuse me with all the names thrown out in the beginning of it. I liked how Lenny's character arc definitely shows how she's changed as a person, especially as she comes to terms with what actually happened with her stepfather and how it affects people around her and how she changes as a person overall for the good. The next book I read after that was The Christmas Tree Farm, and I rated that one 4.25 stars. So Kara is the new owner of the local Christmas tree farm, and Bennett is Jeannie's brother, who Jeannie is the main protagonist in the Pumpkin Spice Cafe book, who's in town for the holidays. So will this turn out to be an Xmas they both won't forget? So book is basically a Hallmark Christmas movie, but with sex in it, which I liked, surprisingly, as I don't really like Hallmark movies because they're very predictable. I liked both Kara and Bennett, though I didn't like the original pretenses of how Bennett came up to talk to Kara in the first place. And then that subplot gets forgotten until the last few pages. So I didn't think that was worked in really well. I didn't like Jeannie as much in this book, probably because I thought she was really annoying in this book, which is probably why her book is my least favorite of the Pumpkin Spice series books. I just didn't like her in this one. The sex scenes weren't as good as the previous books, but I liked the introduction of vibrators and toys in the bedroom and needing to stop if applicable when they were doing it. Overall, it was a good, enjoyable read. That almost made me cry at the end, almost, and I don't cry for books, so it was very surprising that this book almost made me cry, and only a few books have been able to do that for me. After that, I read The Coworker, and I rated that one 4.5 stars. So after a coworker, Dawn, goes missing, Natalie becomes the main suspect. But does everything make sense in the disappearance of Dawn? So I really enjoyed this thriller and had so many twists and turns that I wasn't expecting. It's definitely a book I want to reread just to see what I missed the first time around. I liked the mystery of Dawn and how it wasn't just straightforward as we might expect. I liked how both Dawn and Natalie are unreliable and we can't trust them fully completely, which means reading their perspectives are very interesting. The ending for both characters was good, but the resolution for one character could have been better for me personally, but overall I did enjoy myself while reading this one. And this is the second book I read by Frida McFadden. I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong, but I really enjoy her books. After that, I read Wildfire, and I rated that one 4 stars. So after having a one-night stand with each other, Aurora and Ross end up working at the same summer camp, but can they keep their hands off each other? Or will this be a summer they won't ever forget? So I enjoyed both Aurora and Ross's chemistry as character arcs. This is actually the second book in the series. The first book is Icebreaker. I haven't read Icebreaker. So when I started reading this, I was bombarded with names, and I'm like, I don't know who half these people are. And I had to look up who were the main couple in Icebreaker, which are Nate and Anastasia, or Stacy, or whatever that she's called in this one, and figure out, okay, this is from the couple from Icebreaker, and I'm like trying to figure out who all the rest of the people are. So I didn't like how I was bombarded with all these names in the beginning. It was just very off-putting and very confusing. A couple times I did cringe while reading this because of how close both Aurora and Russ were, how close they were to getting caught, and so I did have to cringe a couple times, and I did have to think about where people's hands were during sex scenes, which kind of took me out. I liked how the miscommunication in this book didn't just end up in a breakup, but they talked it over, which is great because it happens several times throughout this book, but they talk through it. They talk through their feelings. They talk, oh, I'm sorry, I meant this, or I wasn't talking about you in this. And so they talk it out instead of having a breakup in the last 30 pages and then you wondering, oh my gosh, are they going to get back together in the last 30 pages? They get back together. They talk it out, which I'm really glad they do, because I really hate when they break up in the last 30 pages in these books. And I'm like, just get back together. There's not enough time to be doing this. I enjoyed myself a lot more than I thought while reading this. I think I might read the third book in the series. I don't know if I'm going to read Icebreaker though, but I think I might read the third one. The 8th book I read was The Wishless Ones, and I rated this one 3.5 stars. So it's the origin story of Jafar. So it's also part of the Dark Ascension series, and this book was my least favorite of the 3 that I read. I like the story of Rohan, who was Jafar's brother, and Jafar, and how it didn't go how I expected it to go, but it was still a good read. I felt like it did give me too many unanswered questions, like what actually happened with the duckling. Jafar's staff kind of came out of nowhere for me. Jafar, is he actually real magic, or is it something else? And a lot more, and I just don't like having a lot of unanswered questions. But Sultana's plan wasn't what I was expecting it to be based off the synopsis of the book. But I did think it was an interesting way to go with this. I did like all the similarities and callbacks to Aladdin in this book. I didn't think they were forced in. I thought they were good references that compared both of them. The 9th book I read was The Banned Books Club, and I rated this one 4 stars. So Gia has to go back to her hometown after her mother only has a few more months to live and has to deal with the trauma a teacher did to her in that town and deal with that and all the town's perspectives of her as well because of this trauma. You would think with this title, you'd think be it about a banned books club, right? It's not. This club is only mentioned less than 10% of the book. It's more of like a subplot. Not even that. It's just mentioned like, oh, she goes to it. There's no like nuance. Nothing. It's just kind of basic level, and it's really false, misleading title. Because I got this book because I'm like, oh, it's gonna be about a book club about banned books, and it's not. It's less than like 10% of the book is about it. So that was very disappointing, and why this book can only get like a 4 stars from me, because it wasn't what I was promised in this book. The book is mostly about Gia's trauma with what the teacher did to her and the town's perspective of her, because most of them believe the teacher what happened. They don't believe her, and so she has to deal with her knowing the truth and everybody else being against her with this. I did like Gia and her sister Margot's arcs throughout this book, and it was a really good read. But I think, and the people in this book who deserved it, really deserved it, they got it. But I wish it wasn't as rushed, or the punishment was longer for those involved. I also didn't like how the book had character perspectives change throughout the book, and that irks me. So one part of the chapter would be about Gia, another one would be about her sister, another one would be about the local veterinarian, because he plays an important part in the book. And I'm like, I don't like the character change within that, so it drove me insane. I really hate when that happens in that book. That and some other issues is why this book only got 4 stars from me. I enjoyed it, but just some of the issues just didn't work for me. And the last book I read was What the Woods Took, and I rated this one 4 stars. So 5 teenagers were on a wildest retreat and have to figure out how to survive when the 2 adults that were in charge of them disappear, and they start seeing things that shouldn't be there in the woods. So I had a fun time reading this book, and the premise was good. I liked how all 5 of our main characters grew, especially Devin and Sheridan. I wish we got a little more explanation for Ollie, and more explanation about the retreat in general, because it's supposed to be a retreat for troubled kids, and then all this stuff happens. This book also has character perspectives change in the middle of the chapter, and that drove me insane. I wish it had done more of it, like, oh, this is somebody's chapter, this is somebody's chapter, this is somebody's chapter, instead of, I'm going to change chapter perspectives halfway through the chapter, because that just drives me insane. But overall, this was a good read, and I really did enjoy myself while reading. So those were the 10 books I read in February. If you have any ideas for March, let me know down below. Or if you read any of the books and you want to let me know what you thought of them, yeah, just let me know down below. Otherwise, I'll see you next month. Bye.